Hello there, welcome to the Leggett International Real Estate Webinar for January 2023. It's a little bit late in the month, but I would like to wish you a very happy new year, and I hope that 2023 gives you the chance to perhaps buy your dream home or rent your dream home or do something in France, hoping with these webinars will help you out. As always, we will introduce the panelists and then we will get straight amongst the questions. There are lots and lots of questions, and I will do my best to get to as many as I can, but obviously if you have a question that's burning and you see it, you think I need this answered, please send it through and I will do my best to try and ask the panelists if I can. But obviously there are questions that have been submitted and we will get to those first. Okay, let's meet the panel. We start always when Joanna's here, so let's say hello to Joanna Leggett.
Hi everyone and welcome this evening. So I'm Joanna Leggett. I'm one of the directors at Leggett Immobilier and one of the family members. We've been established since 1998. We've got over 650 agents all over France in lots of different areas, so we can help you, with your search, finding you the right property or selling the right property as well. I was an agent myself for about 8 years before I took over in the marketing department. But we've got a world of knowledge and all of our agents are local and can help you with your search as well.
Thank you, Joanna.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Joanna. And obviously, if you're a football fan, you'll know that it's the transfer window and we've made our own signing, a new signing that's just come in, paid a lot of money for him, and his name is Thomas Maron.
Good evening, Andy. Thank you, Andy. Yes, my name's Tom Marin. I'm one of the partners at Blevins Franks, based in Béziers in the sunny south of France, about an hour from the Spanish border. And I've been at Blevins Franks for 7 years, been in the area for 7 years with my wife and children. Blevins Franks has been going for a lot longer. The business has been going for 45 years. And what we do is we help people reorganise their situation, reorganise their assets to be as tax efficient as possible for French residency. And I suppose I would describe what we're doing as in a nutshell as strategic tax and financial planning for French residents.
Thank you, Thomas. Tracy Leonetti, who's normally joined us, she's our relocation expert. Sadly, due to a serious family illness, she's had to pull out this evening. There are some questions about visas. She's managed to answer a couple, and I will give those answers when I would normally go to Tracy. But if you do want more information from Tracy, her email address will come up at the end of the webinar and you can contact her directly. Let's go to Charles Cramaille.
Bonsoir, thank you, Andy. Bonsoir, I'm Charles Cramaille. I am head of Leggett Property Management. At Leggett Property Management, we are in charge of looking after holiday homes in France. So we are basically the guardian angel of your second home in France, and we help you create revenue with it because we help you rent it out for holiday lets. So we offer complete solutions that will help you look after, maintain and rent out your second home in France.
Thank you, Charles. And then we'll go to Paulette, who's just on my screen, is just to the left of you there.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Paulette and I'm the co-founder and agency manager of Agence AXA International. AXA is across France, but we're a specialised agency. All staff are English, either native English speakers or native level English speakers. And we provide a service in English with translations of the summary of the main policy quote so you know what you're getting, and also a link to AXA Bank. We can also open an AXA Bank for you, bank account, sorry.
Thank you. And finally, the whole of these webinars are brought to you by Lumen, and Jonathan Watson is there, although for some reason it says under his face, it says buying your dream. I didn't realise we were buying the dream with you, Jonathan.
Well, that's certainly what we do. Thank you, Andy, and thank you everyone for attending. So yes, my name's Jonathan Watson. I'm Associate Director at Lumon. So we're a foreign exchange broker dealing with France since the year 2000. We work very closely with many of the people you can see on the screen with you, lots of estate agents, notaires, other parties involved in the French property transactions, assisting with the international payments for the purchase of and then any ongoing costs for French property. So yes, we're here today to give you some more information about all the different types of services that are on offer. And just to help us with this, we do like to share some polls at this time, just to try and get a better understanding of where some of our readers and viewers are with a potential purchase. So you should now see on your screen a poll that has come up just asking for a bit more information in relation to this. Good to see some of those answers coming back. If you're looking at a French property transaction this year, obviously you've got a number of times that you could be looking at this. Obviously right now is a great time to be getting out there in certain areas. A little bit chilly, but it's good to see you know, the whole of the country at different times of the year. So yeah, it looks like a really good spread of different times of the year that people are considering getting out there on their next trip. So we also look to ask when clients are potentially financially available to look at a purchase. This can just help us throughout the webinar and ongoing sort of surveys in relation to the financing element. That's certainly something Lumen are concerned with. The exchange rate you get is ultimately what will determine the cost of your property. So yeah, there's a number of different ways that we can manage these factors. So yes, thank you for the replies there. Some good feedback coming in, I can see from the viewers. So yes, thank you very much. I'm going to close that poll now, and I'll be handing back to Andy and look forward to sharing some good information with you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, as I said, if you do have a burning question, there is a sort of a section on your chat bit that says ask questions. If you can do that, they will come up on my screen. As I say, I will try my best to get to them. But let's go to the first question that came in, and this goes to you, Joanna, from Lillian Bell. She says, do you as a purchaser need a solicitor, or will the notaire's office suffice in this role?
Well, that really depends. I mean, generally speaking, in the French market, the French only use notaires. They don't tend to use solicitors. There are certain circumstances when you might want to use a solicitor. For example, if you were buying not through an agent who would also help you through the sale with the notaire, if you're buying privately and perhaps the notaire that's dealing with that sale doesn't speak English, then it might be good to get an English or an international solicitor that could help deal with the notaire on your behalf. But it is an extra cost. Obviously, when you're buying in other countries abroad, generally speaking, you do need a solicitor. But in France, the system is very, very straightforward. The buying process is very straightforward. And generally speaking, people just use the notaire, who's completely biased because they work for the government. So they look after the vendor and the seller and the buyer, should I say. So, you know, and most of the taxes and everything that they collect go to the government. So only, I think it's 20% of their fee actually goes to the notaire, but you don't need to use the solicitor. Most of the notaires these days do speak English. You can have a translator present, but if you are unsure or, you know, buying privately, then yes, of course, you can instruct a solicitor in another country to work on your behalf. But at the end of the day, it's the notaire has the final say because, as I said, they work for the government.
And Joanna, are there English-speaking solicitors that can help in France, or is it one that you have to employ somebody in the UK?
Well, they probably are some in France. Generally speaking, when we do the exhibitions, there is always solicitors at the exhibitions that you can come along and have a chat with. Again, it's down to yourselves because it's an extra fee, usually around about £2,500 that you would need to pay the solicitor, and you would generally have to find and instruct them yourself. We do work with quite a lot of solicitors though, so you know, if anybody was interested or they do want to use a solicitor, then do drop me an email and I can forward your details onto the current ones that we work with.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Thomas. Thomas, Alan Franklin asked, how can I avoid paying capital gains tax on the sale of my UK home when I move to France?
It's all about timing and pre-planning. So to give you an example, if somebody's selling a UK property prior to moving to France and it's only ever been their main residence, then they can do that without paying any UK capital gains tax because there's an exemption for that kind of situation. And of course, if they're selling it before they move to France, then they're not part of the French system and therefore they won't pay any French capital gains tax. If somebody moves to France and then sells what was their UK main home, then they've got a 1-year window in which they can sell that without any tax on either side of the channel. Beyond that 1-year window, then potentially there would be French capital gains tax on the whole gain, and maybe UK capital gains tax as well. The amount and whether there is any tax depends on various factors. It depends on how long you've owned the property for. It depends on whether there were any periods of non-occupation. It also depends on any investments that you may have made into the property. And at Blevins Franks, we're in a good situation because we have a cross-border tax team that is based in London that has expertise in both the French and UK side and how those interact. And for our clients, we can run those calculations. We can work out how much tax they would have to pay in both jurisdictions. There is double taxation relief between France and the UK, so normally you can offset one of those liabilities against the other. And we could provide those calculations and help our clients move forward with their planning.
Thank you, Thomas. There was a question then, obviously, for Tracy. As I said, Tracy cannot join us because of a serious family illness, but as I said, her details are on the screen and will be up there as well later, so you can contact her about relocation, visas, etc. But Susan Cartwright asked, what are the requirements regarding visas now that we are not in the EU? Is there a minimum investment to gain residency? And Tracy came back to me and said, due to Brexit, moving to France for no longer than 90 days in every 180 does require a visa. Yes, there is a minimum requirement. However, this can be made up from different sources, i.e. your pension, certain investments and savings. Owning a property can be also seen as an advantage. And she says, reach out to her if you need any support with this. So as I say, if you need help with visas and relocation, Tracy's your woman, and her details will be on the screen. Well, on the screen, and they will be on there later. Let's go, where are we going now? Let's go to Charles. Charles, Sally Cooper says, with the financial squeeze on families, do you envisage that the demand to rent holiday homes in France will be less in 2023?
Obviously it's difficult to know what the future holds, but it seems like, well, in 2022, we were almost back to 2019 in terms of travel trends and tourism in France. This is obviously because of COVID-19, and it seems like the travel trends and the forecast for 2023 are very optimistic, and we should be back to 2019 or even better than that. The travel trends have changed a little bit. Now people are more looking for remote properties, for more rural experiences and more remote, and also more wellness tourism in general, and eco-friendly and sustainable. All this is a bit more present in the travel trends for 2023. But apparently, and I also can see with the bookings that we currently have on our portfolio, that 2023 should be a very good year for tourism in France, and especially for short-term rentals, because we can definitely see that the trend for short-term rentals, holiday rentals, is showing very good figures for 2023.
Do you find, Charles, that there are more French people looking for short-term holiday lets, or has that always been the case? I mean, is it because French people don't travel so much, or they stay within France?
Obviously, we are present in a lot of places in France, but not everywhere, and so it's difficult to give you to make a generality about it. But no, it seems like a lot of French people are booking in certain areas more than others, but there are also some areas that are very well known for international tourists, and this year we will have a lot more international guests. Well, 2023 should be a better year. So yes, we have a lot of French that would rather spend more money in France than spend a bigger part of their budget on travel. They'd rather spend a bigger part of their budget on finding a bigger house or a better experience rather than travel to the other side of the world.
Okay, great, thank you. Paulette, and I hope I get this lady's name right, Elena Afanasieva says she's concerned that the cost of healthcare will increase once she is retired. Is this the case in France?
I wouldn't say it's particularly related to retirement. A mutual health insurance policy generally just does increase with age. So, whether you're retired or not. In terms of if she's talking about health insurance when moving to France before she has a French social security number, it depends where she's coming from. If she's coming from, say, the UK, and she can check with the Department of Work and Pensions in Newcastle, is she eligible for an S1? Then she can move over straight away and apply for a French social security number. It's not going to cost as much because she doesn't need to apply for health insurance to accompany a visa application because she's got her S1 to do that. So in some respects, it's cheaper if you're retired, if you can get your S1, because that's going to support your visa application. But generally, yes, the older you get with a top-up mutual in France, it increases every year as you get older, unfortunately.
Fair enough, thank you. Jonathan, over to the whole money side of things. William Lawrence wants to know, my pension is in pounds, how is it best to exchange the currency?
Okay, good question. So there's a number of different options really with this. One of the perhaps more popular options with Lumon, we have something called a regular payment plan. Essentially involves having a standing order each month. It's all automated. You just get your pension funds once they're cleared in your UK bank account. So they're coming in on the 1st. You can just arrange a standing order to us, and on the day that the money comes in, we'll automatically convert it into euros at the prevailing rate and send that out. So in terms of a regular income, which of course is the sort of principle of a pension, you can automate that whole process and you'll have your euros coming over. The downside, but also part of the advantage there, you're going to be getting the exchange rate fluctuation. So some months the rate may be higher, some months the rate may be lower. We saw when there was the financial crisis, a number of Brits abroad struggling financially because of a much lower exchange rate. We do know the impact that a weaker pound can have on these matters. So there's other options that are available in terms of either holding onto your funds for a bit longer to try and last out over a period of time. Don't automate things. Some clients will look to build their funds up, and then we can give you information about the latest forecasts and essentially look for a better time to actually send the money over. You can also look at different ways where you may fix exchange rates for the future. So yes, there's a number of different options to manage that exchange rate risk. That doesn't just apply to pensions. I know that was the main thrust of the question, but yes, the FX risk is always present. So whether it's the purchase or your pension, yeah, we have lots of different options to manage that risk compared to you just taking it all on yourself through the banking system, where you're at the mercy of essentially the bank's exchange rates, which we can demonstrate savings against, and also the flow of money. You don't have quite as much control over things compared to some of the options that we can provide.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Just going on the money side of things, Caitlin Lobros has said, can I ask Paulette about setting up a bank account? Yes, Caitlin, Paulette's details are there, and you can obviously refer to her after the webinar in terms of an AXA Bank account. Let's go to Joanna. Back to you, Joanna. Chris Bowden says, can you confirm the current percentage of buying costs on a €650,000 property? Are the percentages basically the same regardless of the price of the property? Your microphone, Joanna.
Yeah, it depends whether you are talking about the notaires fees or the agents fees. The agents have a set barem, and we're members of the FNAM, so we use their barem, and it really does depend on the price of the house. The more expensive the property is, the lower the agency fee. So on something like 650, you'd be looking at about 5 or 6%. On something lower, at the very minimum amount, you might be looking at 10%. So that's generally speaking what the agents would charge across the country. And there is a barem, so every agency will let you know what that barem is, and the barem meaning what price they charge. And then you'll have the notaires fees. That's the only other fee that you would need on top unless you're using other services. But as far as the property goes, the notary's fee is usually between sort of 7 and 8% of the value of the house. So if the value of the house is 650, then it would be without agency fees, then that would be between 6 and 8, depending on where you are and whether you're getting a mortgage, because that sometimes increases the notary's fees, but they're generally not over 8%, and the agents vary.
Okay, thank you.
That help?
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah, Thomas, back to you. Alan Worth says, what is the law regarding property in France? Is this taken into account when you die in the UK or France?
Depends on the situation. If you're talking about somebody who is UK resident and they're buying a French property, let's say as a second home, and they die as a UK resident, that French property would be assessed for French succession tax. It would also be assessed for UK inheritance tax as part of their worldwide estate. And basically the French liability can be offset against the UK liability. On the other hand, if somebody is French resident and they own a French property, then it's really just French succession tax that comes into play. Fortunately, there are lots of things that you can do when it comes to French succession tax to reduce your liability. How much tax you pay on a French property depends on various different factors. It depends on, firstly, how much the property is worth. It depends on whether you've used gifting allowances prior to death. It also depends on who you leave the property to, because France taxes according to the relationship between the deceased and the beneficiary. So, for example, if you're leaving a property to a stepchild, because they are not considered to be in the bloodline, there is a potential charge there of 60%. So what we do at Blevins Franks is we look at all of that and help our clients work out the best way to mitigate against a potential inheritance or succession tax liability, and reduce, if there is a liability, reduce that liability.
Thank you. There's another question that came from Tracy, and as I said, there were a number of questions about visas. Those of you who do have visa questions, as I said, Tracy's details are on the screen, and you can ask her and email her anytime. But Annabelle Lever asked her, I'm British and the wife of an EU citizen. We want to live in France with a husband working from home for a UK company. Do we need visas? And Tracy came back to me and said, the EU citizen obviously needs no visa. The non-EU citizen can apply from France attaching to her EU spouse. However, working remotely for a UK company would require the company registering the employee with URSSAF, which is the sort of tax office, I think, in France, or him setting up as an independent activity in France. As I say, there are a number of questions about visas, and I can see loads of them coming in. It's sort of a bit of a minefield since Brexit. As I said, if you do have a pertinent question, a specific question, Tracy's details are on the screen, and you can email her at any time. Let's go over to Charles. Charles, Tara Watson wants to know, if we use a property management service to look after our rental property and it gets badly damaged, what processes do companies like yours do to get the damage repaired?
Okay, so before we go to answer that, please be reassured that it's really rare. I do this job for 10 years now. It's really rare that the property gets badly damaged. It can happen, whether it's purposely done or by accident. It can happen, and obviously we do everything we can to make sure that everyone's insured and that whatever happens, the insurance will cover that. So first, we make sure that the owner is properly insured, properly covered, and Paulette can help you with that as well. We make sure that you have the right guarantees. We also make sure that the guests have travel insurance. This is something that is not, fortunately, not very common, but property management companies do normally check the travel insurances of the guests. It's really easy with French guests because they have it in their house insurance. With international guests, it's a bit more complicated, but we always make sure that they are covered. So if it's a small damage, I know you talked about badly damaged, but if it's a small damage, then we make sure that it's covered by the security deposit. We do take a security deposit for each booking, of course. We even have another insurance on top of that in case they cancel their credit card, for example, the credit card they paid their deposit with. So we still can take money on that deposit. And if there is a big issue, if they reverse into a wall and there is big damage, whatever it could be, or completely destroy the pool, then we will make sure that their insurance, their travel insurance, gets in touch with the owner's insurance and arrange for the payment of the damage. And we obviously hold the hand of the owner all the way from the damage to the repair, and we obviously make sure that they also have the right insurance in case they lose a lot of money of, I don't know, 8 weeks of bookings because of the damage. We make sure that they are rightly insured so they can get some money out of that. Maybe Paulette can confirm that, but normally if you're rightly, like properly insured, you can be, I don't know how you call it, but paid for that.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think the other thing, great, Charles, as well, is obviously companies like yourself take away the worry. So if something does happen, you're there to sort it and not expecting people just to turn up and do it themselves. I think that's what we should also stress.
Yeah, we are problem solvers. This is our job. It's our everyday job. We're here to solve problems, probably like all of you guys. But I mean, we're here on the ground to make sure that whatever happens, first we make sure that we avoid it because it's better for us as well. But we make sure that if it happens, everything's in place to make sure that it's going back to normal as quick as possible.
Okay, thank you. Paula, let's go over to a question about the health care system. Philip Norman wants to know, what is the procedure regarding the French healthcare system and obtaining medical insurance? Is this process of application a complicated one?
No, it's not necessarily complicated. It can be long, but for somebody arriving in France with their visa, once they've established residency in France for 3 months, they can then apply for a social security number in France. That's going to take anything between 1 and 6 months. We always hope nearer the 1 month, but it's not a quick process. But it's not overly complicated, and companies like Tracy can help you with that application as well. In terms then of applying for the health insurance top up to go with that, as soon as you've got a social security number, even just the temporary one, we can arrange the mutual top up to go with that. Now, a mutual top up can't be arranged until you've got your social security number, because as the name says, it's a top up insurance. So it will top up whatever the state has refunded. So that you need to have that social security number in place and make the claim for any medical care through that for the mutual to then kick in. If you arrive in France with, as I was talking about earlier, with an S1, you can apply for your social security number straight away. But again, it's going to take between 1 and 6 months to get that number. However, you can then claim refund for any medical expenses you've, say if you've been to the doctor or hospital appointment, you can claim for a refund of those expenses back to the date you made your application. However, you will only have your refund for that for, say, in most cases, your refund from the state is 70%. So because you haven't been able to arrange a mutual top up at that point, you will be open to pay whatever the difference is on top of the refund that you get from the state. But as soon as you've got that number, you can apply for the mutual top up, and then you've got the refund from the state and your mutual on your health insurance. So not an overly complicated process, but can be long. And as I said, Tracy can absolutely help you with the application to get the social security number.
Just a quick one on that, Paulette, because I noticed a couple of people have asked this. There's one guy's just come through there, Colin, saying, what is an S1 that you're referring to? Is this the S1 form that the British government give you?
Exactly. So you can apply to the Department of Work and Pensions in, I think it's Newcastle, and they will let you know if you're eligible for that. And generally you're eligible for that when you reach UK state retirement age. And it just gives a reciprocal agreement between the countries of a refund of healthcare. But what a lot of people think, oh, I've got an S1 in the UK, I don't pay for healthcare with the NHS, it's completely free. So I'll come to the UK with my S1 and I'll get the same cover. What you get with your S1 is the same cover as a French national will get, and that's generally, it's not, healthcare in France isn't free at point of contact. You do pay for it and get the refund back from the state. And as I said, the average refund is 70%. There are more exceptions than rules, but on average, the refund is 70%. So you will arrive with your S1, go to the doctors, pay €25 for your appointment, and you'll get 70% of that back from the state with your S1. And then once you've got a mutual in place, that will cover the extra 30% that you're short.
Okay, great. I mean, so just for example, I think for me, if I pay my £25, just to give you an example, I think the French government give back out €19, and then the rest of it is made up from the mutual. So just so it's clear about that.
Yeah.
Okay, Jonathan, we're over to money again. Karen Williams wants to know, if I use a French currency broker like yourselves to move my funds for purchase of a home in France, what charges do you make?
Okay, yeah, excellent question. So with costs, Lumon, we cover our costs through the exchange rate. To keep things very, very simple, there's no additional costs as such. So it's not like when you use some other services where you may get a large bill at the end. You know, if you're using, I don't know, say an accountant or something like that, and you get the bill at the end. With us, we make a margin on the difference between our buying and our selling exchange rates when we do a trade. So we'll be quoting a final price to you of what the currency is going to cost you. If you're buying euros with pounds, you'll never pay more than that sterling amount. And every cent of the euros that you purchase are yours. So there's no transfer fees, you know, no cost to send money out. If we're holding money for you, there's no charge for us to hold the funds here. And if we're giving you information about what's going on in the markets and supporting you, you know, there's no sort of cost for that. Like I say, we cover our costs through the actual exchange rate that we charge. And that is fairly standard throughout the industry. You do get some firms who will charge a sort of fixed charge on top of transactions, or sometimes transfer fees. Still quite common in the banking sector to get transfer fees. People may be familiar in the UK with the CHAPS transfer on larger amounts of money. The banks will still often charge a small fee for that. But like I say, at Lumon, there's no additional costs on top of you know, the exchange rate that we're charging you. And we're very upfront about that from the outset. It's free to get registered and set up. And yeah, there's nothing additional charged. When we do a trade, we'll make very clear what the exchange rate is. Everything's done on a recorded phone call, and then it's the client decision to purchase or not. And once they've given a positive instruction, we will buy the currency, and it's all locked in. We'll then email a contract through, and you'll be able to access, you know, all of the information of the trade for any payments as needed.
Okay, thank you. Joanna, let's go back to you about property. Christopher Howell wants to know, is it still possible to buy a habitable home in France for less than €30,000? And if so, is it possible to get estimates from builders to finish that property off before proceeding to purchase?
Yes, of course, there are still properties under 30,000, which are obviously going to probably need a lot of work. You can get nice little small lock-up and leads. The sort of cheapest areas in France are around the sort of Cruz and Limousin areas, where you can get sort of small farm buildings that will need renovation. But I would say that that's one of the biggest mistakes, is underestimating the costs of the renovation, because you have to be very careful, particularly if you buy something that's quite large in a cheap price range, because the cost of renovation might sort of be more than it's actually worth. So the best thing to do would be to talk to your agent, have a look at properties in that area that are already renovated and what those sort of prices are. And then, of course, yes, there's lots of registered builders that your agent or people in the area can recommend, can come around and give you a quote. A lot of builders will come and do sort of a 2-hour walk around with you and give you an idea of what's going to be needed to be done. Or you could ask for a written DEVI, which is like a written estimate, and obviously that would be able to tell you how much it's going to cost, and then you could have a look at that and see whether it'd actually be worth your while doing it. But there is lots of cheap properties around, and you still can pick up the little bargains for €30,000. Depends how much work you can do yourself, but obviously when you come to resale, particularly things like roofs, you're going to need guarantees, 10-year guarantees for, so you'd have to take out some sort of insurance for that as well. But the long and short of it is, yes, there are still lots of properties under 30,000 that you can pick up, and have a look on our website. You'll probably see quite a lot on there.
Okay, thank you. Thomas, back to a question about the state pension. Sharon Bush wants to know, what is the procedure for accessing your state pension in France, and would I have to pay French tax on it?
The good news is it's not that different to the UK process for accessing your state pension. There's a slightly different form that you have to fill out, which is the international form, and there's a different contact centre, but otherwise it's a very similar process. You can do it via the gov.uk website. You do have to pay French tax on a UK state pension if you're a French resident. A lot of people fall into the trap of thinking that you don't, because they've read that certain UK pensions are not taxed in France. That is only true of certain government service pensions, and while they are not directly taxed in France, they are indirectly taxed in the sense that they're brought into the calculation to work out what tax might be payable on your other income. I think the good thing about being eligible for the UK state pension is that it also means you're eligible for the S1 form, which Paulette alluded to earlier. And the S1 form is really valuable. It's a valuable document in several different respects. Firstly, as Paulette was talking about before, it gets you into the French health system on the back of your UK national insurance contributions at no extra cost. But from a tax or from a social charge point of view, it exempts you from social charges on any pension income that you have. And social charges in France on pension income are 9.1%, so they're not insignificant, so it is worthwhile avoiding those social charges. It also reduces the social charge liability on any investment income from 17.2% down to 7.5%. So really is a useful thing to have, and it does figure quite prominently in a lot of the planning that we do with our clients when our clients get to that age.
Okay, thank you. Charles, this one I hope you may be able to answer. Thomas Devlin wants to know, if I buy a home to use exclusively for holiday lets, do I still have to pay the taxe d'habitation?
Oh, yes. Yeah, it's as sorry to kill the vibe, but yeah. In fact, I'm going to kill it even more. It's going to, now the taxe d'habitation is more of a tax for vacant homes, because only, I'd say, rich people, what it means, I don't know, but it means that people who have a very high revenue will pay it still for this year. And then vacant homes, it will in the end be a vacant home tax, and it will increase in some communes, in some places, from 5 to 60%. So just like the taxe foncière was more expensive in 2022, then it will be in 2023 as well. So the answer is yes, and unfortunately, even more than last year.
Okay, so we should just say the foncière is for sort of payment for sort of services like rubbish collection and things like that. Is that correct? And the habitation is about the living tax, if that makes sense. That very badly.
I mean, I'm not an expert in tax. It depends. Some cities include some stuff in the foncière, some others do additional taxes. But the foncière is when you own the land, when you own the property, I mean, and the taxe d'habitation is when you have, well, either a vacant home. It used to be only for tenants and obviously for owners, but the tenants used to pay only the taxe d'habitation. Now, if you basically own a second home in France, you pay both.
Okay, thank you. Paulette, let's go to a question about insurance. Karen Sampson wants to know, if I take out home insurance, can I get covered similar to the UK when items are damaged? Will they be replaced as new for old? I think she's asking whether the new for old policy exists in France.
It does, but not quite the same as in the UK. The main difference between home insurance in France and the UK is in the UK, it's called all risks. So it doesn't matter what the damage is to your property, to your contents, things like that. The insurer's not going to ask you, just file a claim and say this has happened and they'll pay it. In France, it's multi-risk insurance. So you're insured for like a list of guarantees. So the main examples are fire, theft, climatic events. They're probably the main ones, but there's a list of, say, about 8. If the damage to the item isn't one of those, then it's probably not covered. If, say, for example, you drop your own TV, you can have new for old. For example, we have new for old for items up to 10 years old or for the life of the item. So if you drop your TV, it doesn't matter whether you've got that new for old or not, it's not going to be covered because you caused the damage, and that's not one of the guarantees. If you went to your friend's home and you dropped their TV, they can claim on your responsibility civil, which is a bit like public liability insurance, because you caused that damage. And that's included, as Charles said before, that's included in all home insurance policies in France, that if you cause damage or injury to someone or something, that's covered in your home insurance policy. The new for old, it more comes into play. Say, for example, you have a flood or water damage, and your 3-piece suite is damaged, and you've got the new for old in there. You will get a new 3-piece suite rather than, you know, one that's the equivalent cost of value of a 10-year-old or 12-year-old 3-piece suite. So it's kind of, yeah, it's quite different to in the UK, but it depends on what the damage is, and it's not kind of, you know, I'll go and sue who caused the damage. It's more, and it's more like an admin thing. You're not going to go and sue somebody because they caused damage to your property. You're just going to put a claim through your insurance on their insurance. So yes and no is the answer to that question. That was a long way to say yes and no, wasn't it?
Okay, just on the insurance thing, because this came in late last night. Nick Mather, who has a property in the Dordogne for 12 years, obviously because of the Brexit situation, doesn't come back to his property as often as he would. He's wondering, is there any additional protection available to cover not being there for longer periods?
So for a holiday home, if your property is going to be unoccupied for more than 90 days in the year, and that's not 90 days per time, it's 90 days cumulative throughout the year, that should already be declared on the home insurance policy that it's, you know, it is unoccupied for more than 90 days in the year. So as long as that's on the policy, it doesn't matter whether you only visit the property once a year for a week or you know, 6 months of the year, as long as that's marked on the policy. I'm sure it's pretty similar with, you know, other insurers, that 90-day in occupation. So as long as it's marked as a second home, and that yes, that it's going to be unoccupied for more than 90 days in total through the year, then there's no difference. Brexit didn't make any difference at all to that. Probably the only thing it didn't make any difference to.
Thank you. Joanna, this one's come through on the question thing, and I like to try and keep it live by seeing these ones. So I'll see if you can answer this one. Simone Who has said, for Joanna, are sellers okay with buyers including conditional clauses in the compromis de vente? For example, house purchase contract is subject to UK house sale. Is this acceptable and common practice?
It's not generally accepted by the vendors. It depends on their situation. Every case would be individual. You'd have to put some sort of time limit in the compromis for the sale of the house in the UK. At the moment, properties are selling so quickly in France. The market's been really strong all year, and so it's unlikely that vendors would want to wait if they got another buyer. If it was like an inheritance, everybody was happy with the price, and you know the vendor wasn't in any rush to sell, then of course that could be a possibility, and it could be put into the compromis that they're willing to wait. But generally speaking, in a lot of the instances I've been in, they're not. You know, they just want to get the property sold, and it depends on how quickly. You know, if your house was under offer in the UK, then that might be a different scenario, and they might be prepared to wait by a certain date. But generally speaking, it's much better to be putting in offers, and there's much more negotiation if you've already sold and you're ready to buy. But it is a possibility. It can be done. Suspensive clauses can be done as long as both the vendor and the buyer agree. But generally, I say the vendors wouldn't wait.
Fair enough. I hope that helps, Simone. Jonathan, over to money. Colin Barton says, if I make a deal with a currency broker, ready for my French purchase, but the sale falls through and I want to withdraw my money, is it possible, and are there significant charges?
Okay, so I think whenever this question gets posed, often clients are concerned they're just going to lose all of their money, and that's certainly not the case. So if you've purchased euros already, once clients registered with us and purchased currency, we have what we call a euro wallet. It's basically a segregated euro client account, very similar to solicitors, accountants, other institutions who hold money on behalf of their clients. So any funds held in the client's account, in the euro account, we call it a wallet, any funds there can actually be traded back into pounds. So if things don't work out quite as anticipated, then that is certainly an option. We can sell the euros back to buy pounds and then send it back to you. Now, depending what exchange rates have done, that could result in a financial loss for you. Of course, if the rates got worse for selling euros, then you could end up, on paper, losing money from the exchange rate fluctuation. So there are other options there. If the particular property you've been looking at or investment hasn't worked out for whatever reasons, you can still hold the euros with us in the wallet until they're needed. So, sometimes people want to find another property, or, things can come a bit clearer a few months later. That's certainly an option, just to hold the funds there and see if another property comes along. You could also look to potentially open your own euro accounts, whether in France or in the UK, to actually take receipt of the funds and then try and do something further from that. So yeah, you don't sort of lose the money. It's sat in euros, and then it can be converted back into sterling at your wishes, or just held on to until you find another property, if the French property dream is still your ideal goals.
Okay, thank you. Thomas, over to you. Sylvia Freeman says, I'm selling my house in London and moving to France imminently. What is my tax position as a retiree age 65?
It's potentially a good position. I mean, people have this, some people have this preconception of France as being a high tax jurisdiction. And I think that probably is true for people who are working in France, as maybe some of the people on this panel can attest to. But for retirees, France is actually a pretty tax-friendly country, as long as you do things in the right order and you organise things in the right way. So selling, I mean, if you're selling a property in London prior to moving to France, as I mentioned before, that's something that you can do tax-free. In a lot of cases, if people are selling London property, they don't necessarily want to reinvest all of the proceeds into a French property. There may be a surplus, which is great because it then gives them an investment pot that they can invest tax efficiently to provide a supplementary income on top of their pension income. So from that perspective, it's very good. France also brings some interesting tax planning opportunities as well. So one of the things that you can do potentially is you can access a pension. If you have a private pension, a SIP or a personal pension, you can access that at a tax rate of just 7.5%, subject to certain conditions. Obviously, that is potentially very favourable compared to 20 or 40 or 45% in the UK. So that is often a route that people go down. But these kind of areas, we recommend that you take advice because it can be complicated. And of course, if you're retiring to France age 65, then it won't be long before you get that S1 form. And as I mentioned earlier, the S1 form is a very valuable document because of the social charge reductions that it gives you, among other things. So I would say that in the position of retiring to France age 65, having sold a property in London, it could be a very positive situation.
Okay, thank you. Paulette, over to you. Wendy Grant says, I'm registered in the UK with a disability and need regular medical treatment. Is it possible to obtain medical insurance in France when I declare this to the insurer?
So in terms of applying for the Mutuelle top-up once you've got your social security number, other than the top 2 levels of Mutuelle, and we've got probably, I don't know, about 38 levels, there's no medical questionnaire. So, you know, it doesn't matter if you've got pre-existing conditions or not, you know, you're not going to pay any extra premiums because you've got a long-term medical condition. Equally, your premiums don't go up each year. Because of how many claims you've made, how many times you've been to the doctor and things like that. It's not that type of insurance policy. So you equally don't get a no claims discount either. So if you don't go to the doctors, you don't get a discount. It's based on kind of everybody's equal. Depending on the disability, you may also qualify in France for like a long-term illness where you get your all medical treatment for that illness paid at 100% by the state. But you'd need to ask your doctor once you're registered in France, and there's a list of those conditions on, there's a website called Amelie. I'm trying to think how you spell that. I don't think it's got an E at the end. It's a really, really good website, and it's basically the government website for healthcare. And there's so much information on there, and there's also you can access quite a few pages in English as well, and that will give you a list of those pre-existing conditions where you will get 100% from the state. In terms of when you're moving to France, if you're applying for healthcare to support your visa application with a long-term disability or a long-term illness, that can be difficult because no pre-existing illnesses will be covered. So you do need to make some sort of provision for that first few months when you move to France. You know, you can apply for a health insurance that will support your visa and you'll get your visa, but it doesn't then help when you're in France if you need to access, you can access the healthcare system. You will just pay for it until you've got your social security number. It may not be covered on the medical insurance that you took to support your visa application. So it can be tricky. We would generally say if you have like a long-term medication, to try and get as much as you can before you move over, so at least you've got a few months supply once you're in France.
Amelie, I think it's A-M-E-L-I. I don't think there's an E on the end.
Yeah,
that's
no,
right.
Thank you.
Charles, to you, Catherine Borden says, do companies like yours give a breakdown of costs versus rental income before we start letting, so we have an idea of what we may earn from our holiday home?
So companies like us, normally they do, the way we do it, we hold the hand of the owner all the way to their first guests and till they get paid every month. So there are 2 options. First, they own a property, they own a second home in France, or they will own it in the next few months. Then we offer a free rental study where we tell them exactly how much we will pay them for each week booked, or at least the minimum of what we will pay them, because we use dynamic pricing, so it can go up, sometimes go down, of course, in low season. Then we tell them exactly how much they can earn. We do a rough estimation as precise as possible of the forecast and how much they can earn per year, and the occupancy rate that they can get. We also explain how we work. We explain about the security deposit, as you asked earlier, how we work, the softwares that we use. We're very transparent about everything. We give them as much visibility as possible, so they know exactly how it's going to work. We tell them the next 5 or 6 steps from then. Then I could go for all the steps, but it would take quite a long time. So the second option is they don't own a property yet. They're looking at 2 or 3 or 4 properties and they hesitate. We can give them an estimation, okay, so a rough estimation of the rental income that they could get per year. We give them 3 figures. We give them the average daily rate, we give them the annual occupancy rate, and the annual revenue. Okay, with these 3 figures, they can have a better idea of which property would earn more, so it could help them to pick the right property. when they pick the right property, or at least the one that they really want, which is, by the way, not necessarily the one that should earn the biggest amount of money, but the one that they really love because they will spend their holidays there. Then once that is done, we provide them with a full rental study. And then after that, they just need to sign the mandate and we take care of everything.
Okay, great. Thank you. Joanna, you mentioned about when we were asked the question about putting things in the compromis de vente, saying that properties are being snapped up. Margaret Campbell wants to know, the property market and prices have slowed down a little in the UK. Do you see the same happening in 2023 in France?
I'm sorry, can you?
Yeah, basically, the property market in the UK has slowed down. Do you envisage the same thing happening in France in 2023?
We think it might slow down a little bit. We don't think the prices are going to start dropping. It's just that the banks are going to be a lot tighter on who they lend money to. Obviously, Brexit has hindered British people getting mortgages. They still can get mortgages, but the criteria is a lot stricter than it was before. And the same thing's sort of going to happen in France. So they're going to be a lot more tighter controls on the French being able to borrow. And what that may mean is that the market might slow down a little bit. People might not move because they might not be able to get a mortgage, or they might want to do equity release. But we do think that in the first sort of 6 months of this year, it will slow down a little bit. We don't see that there's going to be any price decreases at this stage.
Okay, just to follow on from that, because a few people have asked, and I notice a couple come up here as well. There's an Al Steiner and Joel Subra have asked, and this is just a quick answer from you, Joanna. If you find a property and you want to move in, and suppose everything goes to plan, what is the sort of time scale between finding and moving in France?
Well, that's how long is a piece of string? Really depends on the property, but realistically, the quickest, if there's no SAFER, which means we don't have to send off for the SAFER, it's the farming community to get permission. The quickest we've done a sale is in 6 weeks if all the paperwork is in order, all of the, the diagnostic reports have been done. It usually happens like that if a sale's fallen through and everything's ready to go and we find another buyer quickly, then the sale can move very quickly again. But generally speaking, it's about 3 to 4 months to go through. And depending if it was a situation where it's an inheritance, which obviously in France there's a lot of inheritance because you can't disinherit your children, so it may be 4 or 5 children that have inherited the property and we have to wait for them to all sign, or send it out, or one doesn't agree. That can take longer, but generally speaking, most sales take about 3 to 4 months.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan, I think we've got time for this one. This has come in as we have been on. Paul Reed says, because obviously we're talking about purchasing a property, Paul Reed says, what is the best strategy as regards buying euros to buy a property? Is it when you actually find a property or before? What do you advise?
Excellent. I've been waiting for a question a bit more about this and the markets, just to highlight potential volatility. And with new clients, one of the first things certainly I do and a lot of my team are trained to do is just to really explain all the different options to the client in terms of buying currency. So if you're going to use the bank, it's fairly linear. Joanna was just explaining there about buying a French property and the timescales. So just like in most countries, you have your offer in, gets accepted, a deposit is paid, and then a few weeks, maybe months later, a balance. If you're using the bank for that, you're really forced to accept whatever the exchange rate is on the day of making those payments, which isn't too bad for your deposit. Once you're getting to the balance, though, if you've got to wait 3 months before you can actually purchase the currency, we don't know what the rates are going to do tomorrow, let alone in 3 months' time. So that can really cause some issues with clients in terms of balancing the risk reward there. So, in sort of more direct answer to the question, I'm conscious of time. We will have a good chat with the client, examine their sort of risk profile, their attitudes to risk. We consult a lot of the FX research that's out there. We look at research from about 50 different banks to try and come up with almost a house view of the averages of potential directions exchange rates can take. And we'll share all of this information with the clients and the different options that we have to actually buy currency to give them a proper strategy to approach this. Because, yeah, if it goes the wrong way, a couple of cents on a 6-figure sum, you are talking about thousands difference. And of course, that can be amplified. So the politicians' non-answer to the question is really it does depend on the client. And the best thing to do is to have a chat with a specialist about all your different options and how it all works. And then you can make a decision about what's going to suit you best.
Okay, great. I'm very conscious that our hour is up. One thing I will say, there are a few people have asked that is this being recorded? Yes, it is being recorded, and there will be a link available afterwards. So if there's things you want to rewind in and obviously look at the wonderful, good-looking panel that we have, you can spend as many hours as you want staring at us all. Thank you so much for joining us. Our next one, I believe, unless I'm guessing this because I haven't written it down, but I think is Tuesday the 28th of February. Joanna may confirm that for me if she's got it in front of her, but I think it's Tuesday the 28th of February. The other thing is Joanna and I think members of Lumon and I think some other people, I'm not sure if anybody from Blevins Franks is going to be there, but A Place in the Sun, or you can confirm this, Thomas, A Place in the Sun exhibition is
it's actually the France show, Andy. It's the French property show.
Right, and that's weekend after next, yes?
No, it's this weekend coming up. It's Friday and Saturday this weekend. It's at the Novotel in Hammersmith. And if you go onto our website, onto the Facebook page, you can get free tickets from our Leggett Immobilier Living in France Facebook page. But it is this Friday, this Saturday and Sunday at the Novotel in Hammersmith, where we'll all be having stands and you can come and have a chat with us. I think there's also a webinar on the 15th, which has an American theme. So if you're an American tuning in, the one on the 15th would be very good for you as well. So those are the dates, Andy.
Yeah, sorry, I got it all completely wrong. So France show this weekend at the Novotel. Tickets available on the Leggett website. Tuesday the 28th is the next one of these sort of webinars, but also as Joanna's just said, on the 15th there is a sort of one for American people that may be wanting to move across to France. I'm over time, but we just should get everybody to say cheerio. So we'll say goodbye from Joanna.
Bye everyone. Yeah, hopefully maybe see some of you at the show next weekend. Thanks.
And the new boy Thomas. Goodbye from Thomas.
Yeah, goodbye from me, and I'll be there at the weekend as well at the show. We'll be there with our Blevins Franks stand.
It seems to be everyone is there except me. Paulette, goodbye from you.
I won't be at the show, but you can find us on our website, AXA-in-France. But lovely for you. Well, thank you for listening.
Charles, goodbye from you.
Thank you very much, everyone. You can get in touch with me if you have any questions. Please don't hesitate anytime. I won't be at the show, but I will be, well, Zoe will be there for me, and she will be here to answer all your questions if you have any. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next month.
Okay, and bye from Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Thank you to the panelists, all our viewers. Yes, if anyone's got any questions, please get in touch. You should see some contact details on the screen there. Otherwise, in any of the links you'll have used to sign up for the webinar, there will be ways and means to get in touch. So yeah, absolutely do try and get as much information as possible. It should all be very worthwhile.
Okay, thank you to all our panelists. Sorry we couldn't get through the questions. I do try and rattle through them as best I can, but obviously we need to give proper answers. As Jonathan has said, all the details you can see below our heads there, all the email addresses for the various panelists are there, and you can contact them anytime. It leaves me to say thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next month, and we all have to give you a little wave. Cheerio.
Bye.
Bye.